Hi everybody. Welcome to week 12. That's right, we are just 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, and so I'm going to change the pace of the course a little bit here over these next 2 weeks. We really are very close to the end of the semester, and I'm sure most of you are looking forward to that, but I want us to take a little bit different approach for the next couple weeks, as I said, and you can see it right there in the title of the slide. Yep, we are going to talk about movies. So let's proceed and get right to that. So I do this every week, every overview lecture, and maybe you get bored with it, but that's okay. The point is that this semester my goal has been to provide you with several different tools in your toolbox that you can use in strategic planning. I honestly believe that there is not one best approach to strategic planning. I also honestly believe that it's not a cookbook, and that's going to talk to leadership, but it's also going to talk to approach. There's no one best approach that's going to work for every organization, and so to that end, we have talked at length about John Bryson's 10-step model, and the textbook that you bought this semester that I required you to buy, the reason you have that textbook is because it is a great resource. It provides a lot of worksheets that you can employ in your own strategic planning effort within an organization. And if you carefully look through that book, which I want you to, what you also have discovered is a lot of those resources are going to help you write your term project. We talked about Mark Moore's strategic triangle, and I admit that I think the strategic triangle is a pretty useful tool, especially when an organization is just starting its strategic planning effort. I think that it gives a simple but somewhat elegant approach to members of an organization who want to talk about what is it we actually produce, what's our capacity for producing it, and really what gives us the legitimacy anyway to produce this public value. I presented some of Jen Lockman's YouTube videos to you, and the thing I like about her videos is that she boils down a lot of concepts to some fairly concise steps that are especially useful for a nonprofit. And then finally we talked about the balanced scorecard, Kaplan and Norton. And again, I think you can see in that this is an approach for an organization to understand itself. You know, these perspectives of the financials, the learning perspective, the client perspective, the business practices perspective. All those things are supposed to support your strategic plan. They should not each be operating in a vacuum, and I think that's what the balanced scorecard is helping you to understand. And so again, all these different ways of looking at strategic planning, they're there for a reason. And the reason is that at some point your boss in your organization might tell you that congratulations, you just became the strategic planning expert. So it would be good to have some tools in your toolbox when that day comes. Before we do that, I want to remind you we have 2 more written assignments left. They both have to do with your term project. First, on November 19th, the term project outline is due, and please do look at the assignments tab because I provide you with a lot of resources to help you with that assignment. And then your final term project paper is due on December 14th, which is, of course, the Wednesday of finals week. So that's 100 points of your grade right there. So please do take that seriously. And remember, your term project is an analysis of your organization. And then also remember, we have 3 discussions left, including this week. So a few things to do before we get to the end of the term. I assigned you this week Bryson chapter 11 from Bryson's 2011 book. I gave you the excerpt from that book. And so here's what Bryson says. He says, as has been pointed out before, Strategic planning is not a substitute for effective leadership. There is no substitute for effective leadership and committed followership when it comes to planning and implementation. Instead, strategic planning is simply a set of concepts, procedures, and tools designed to help executives, managers, and others to think, act, and learn strategically on behalf of their organization's stakeholders. Again, to use this cookbook analogy, if anybody could follow a recipe and make a very elaborate dish, you know, like the kinds you see on the Food Network or something, then anybody could be a chef. But in fact, I can't go into my kitchen and follow a cookbook and make some of those recipes. There's a lot more that goes into it than that, and a lot of that is experience and understanding of what you're doing. And a lot of it is leadership. So that's what we're talking about this week. Excuse me, I had to cough there. Okay. So Bryson in chapter 11, the excerpt I give you, he says leaders do about 9 things. And these are the 9 things. He says leaders understand the context, right? So they do understand the environment, the organizational history, maybe the organizational culture, stakeholders, mandates. They know what those things are. Do they know them cold? Maybe not. In fact, a good leader, excuse me again, I do have a cold. A good leader might be the person humble enough to say, look, I need to understand more about this. And that is when a good leader needs to scan the environment. That's when a good leader needs to do an exercise to understand stakeholders and mandates. But the leader does understand the context. The leader understands the people involved, including oneself. So, you know, does a leader understand herself? Does a leader understand others in the organization? Where everybody's coming from? I mean, does a leader actually have the self-awareness to understand how she or he affects the other people in the organization? That's a really good question to ask yourself if you're a leader. A leadership sponsors the project. And here Bryson's talking about the strategic planning project, but really it's any project. So if the leader is not on board with strategic planning in an organization, well, who's going to be? And then the leader champions the process. So it's really clear in an organization, and I think most of you can think of examples, when a leader is not being true to the organization, when it's clear that the leader is not enthusiastic about the effort. I think we all see that you know, that kind of lack of genuineness. We've all seen it in organizations that we've worked in. And so it's, if a leader wants to do strategic planning because they think it's something they have to do and not something they really want to do, then I think there might be a problem. And a leader facilitates the process. So what that really means is just making resources available. If your boss says you're the strategic planning guru, but then gives you no resources to do it, then I don't think that your boss is really being a good leader on that front. And then a leader fosters collective leadership. So this, to me, in terms of leadership, is one of the most important things that a leader can do. If as a leader you are not growing more leaders in the organization, I think you're really failing. If you're not allowing leaders to rise to the surface at all levels of the organization, then I think then you're making a really big mistake. Because if the organization depends on just one leader, what happens when that leader's gone? What happens when that leader gets sick? I mean, just real life things. So growing other leaders in an organization is, in my opinion, one of the most important things a leader can do. And then a leader uses dialogue and deliberation. Well, you know, this doesn't actually go down very well in some organizations, does it? Because some leaders actually like to talk down to people or at people. You know, they don't like to use actual dialogue with people. And then a leader makes and implements the decisions. Well, what that really implies is accountability for one's actions. A leader is accountable for the decisions that they take, right? It's not something that a leader can pass off to others. And then finally, the leader is the person who enforces norms, settles disputes, and manages conflicts. That number 9 right there goes back to number 6. You know, if there are several leaders in an organization and they're encouraged to grow, then a leader gets help in doing that, number 9, managing conflicts. If we have one leader in the organization who's the only person who can manage conflicts, then I think we're going to have more conflicts, because conflict is inevitable. But if conflict is not mitigated, then we have problems in the organization. So, okay, look at this list. Here it is. It's a long list of movies, and most of these movies I've actually seen. I didn't see them all when they came out. You can see some are kind of old. You can see a lot of these on Turner Classic Movies or one of those kinds of networks. But anyway, in my opinion, all of these movies speak to leadership, strategic leadership, and that's what I'm going to ask you to comment on in the discussion board this week. And so, you know, in a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses, they'll say, hey, let's talk about leadership, and somebody will have the bright idea to show a movie, and they'll show a military movie like Patton or, you know, the Band of Brothers miniseries, which is great. You know, leadership is a big part of the theme of those movies. But leadership really is a human characteristic, and leadership comes up in many different kinds of settings, certainly not just a military setting. And so I think that leadership is exhibited in these movies, you know, in an entertaining way, sometimes a tragic way, sometimes a funny way, but I think leadership is exhibited in all these movies. And so what I'm going to have you do, as I describe in a second here, is use these movies to highlight strategic leadership and talk about it in the discussion board. So this is what we're going to do this week. This week we're going to focus on leadership. Next week we're going to focus on leadership in a slightly different way. And as I said, I made an assumption that each of you has seen at least one of these movies. If you haven't, then suggest another movie that you have seen. But here's what I want you to do with the movie. First of all, you're going to say which movie you're talking about, so we understand what movie you're talking about. And then I want you to tell us who the strategic leader or leaders, maybe there's more than one, in the movie. And in just 1 or 2 sentences, 3 sentences, say, what's the strategic vision or the strategic end state that this leader holds? What is this leader trying to do strategically? Not just in the moment, but strategically. And then how does the leader communicate this vision? Is the leader successful, or does the leader fail in the effort? And then, does the leader have any followers? Right? Are there followers who react to the leader's vision? And if so, how do they react? And then I want you to go back to the Bryson chapter, and I want you to look at these 9 roles that leaders assume. And I want you to talk about which role or roles your leader or leaders in this movie play. Now, there's a reason that I'm using movies, and that is because I think popular culture is a touchstone for a lot of us. And, you know, people relate to movies. A lot of movies people quote lines from, and we quote them over and over again, and they actually become part of the fabric of our culture. And so I think that when we talk about leaders, I think it's a very useful touchstone for all of us to refer to and think through, how does a movie reflect the things we've been talking about in this strategic planning class. So again, that's the entire discussion project this week, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion. I really want you to put your innovative thinking caps on, and feel free to write about these movies that you have seen, and hopefully you've seen one of them. If you haven't, come up with one, and we'll see where the discussion goes. So that's it for this week. I appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.